Now, your Republican primary opponent, Senator George LeMieux, has been consistent in saying that he has supported and continues to support Senator Marco Rubio. Can you speak to that?
Well, I can tell you one thing. When I served in the state legislature, Marco Rubio was the Speaker of the Florida House. He selected me to serve as his Republican majority leader. It was at that time that Charlie Crist was the governor. George LeMieux was his chief of staff. Actually, Charlie called George his junior partner. And so Marco and I were fighting for a conservative agenda to carry on the reform movement of Jeb Bush. And Charlie Crist and George LeMieux and others in that camp of the party were talking about moving to the center. They were talking about more moderation and that the best way for Republicans to win was to be more like Democrats. I didn't believe that then, and I don't believe that now. Republicans don't need to be less partisan. Republicans need to be more principled. And when Marco Rubio was running against Charlie Crist for United States Senate, George LeMieux was supporting Charlie Crist to the very end. He was attacking Marco Rubio to the very last day. I stood with Marco Rubio from the very beginning, and I think it just shows very clearly what side of the camp Republican Party that I'm from. It's the conservative reformers, not the type of Republicans that go with the wind and go with whatever the polls say. And so in spite of Senator LeMieux trying to reinvent history, I think the facts prove themselves out, and I think it's unfortunate that he's been making those types of statements.
What do you think of this whole Jim Greer, Charlie Crist, and George LeMieux connection? What would you make of that?
Well, we've suffered through a lot of problems at the Republican Party of Florida. We've actually been able to turn the corner when John Thrasher took the reins from Jim Greer, and then more recently Dave Bittner, my good friend, who we unfortunately just lost to a battle against Lou Gehrig's disease. But a few years ago, when Charlie Crist was the governor and George LeMieux was his chief of staff, and then when George LeMieux left the state payroll, George LeMieux actually went to the state party payroll and was earning $10,000 a month on a contract that was authorized by Jim Greer. And I think it just goes to the fact that there was so much corruption at the Republican Party of Florida, and so much that I still don't even know about the finances and who was paid and how they were paid. And so it's very disturbing to see the connection between George LeMieux and Jim Greer, and I hope people are going to continue to ask questions about it. But one thing is for certain is that there was an establishment Republican Party of Crist and LeMieux and Greer and others who were fighting against the conservative reformers. They were fighting against Marco Rubio and myself and others, and I think we finally moved past that, but I still think there's a lot of questions to answer as to the history of the RPOF and who knew what and when they knew it.
And do you think some of that stuff will come out in the upcoming trial with Chairman Greer, or former Chairman Greer's trial?
Well, I don't know enough about it. I haven't really been paying too much to it. I do know that those issues are out there, but I've been staying focused on running our campaign, talking about myself, talking about my record, talking about my vision for the future, and comparing it to my Republican rivals and why I'm the best Republican. Because what we've learned in Washington is it's just not about electing any Republican. We have to elect the right Republican, and I've proven myself on the tough issues. Even when it wasn't popular, I've stood firm. I've proven that I'll stand up to Democrats and Republicans who act like them, and I think that's what's important, that we elect the right Republican who's going to go to Washington and stand shoulder to shoulder with those who recognize that our country is at a tipping point and that we can't waver right now. This is a line in the sand moment, and we need to fight in order to put our country back on the right track.